and welcome to tonight's meeting of the ISD 191 Burnsville-Egan Savage School Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The date is January 14th, 2021, and the time is 6:30 p.m. I'd like to start by welcoming our audience. We always appreciate knowing that people are tuning in and learning about all the great things that are going on in 191. Next, Director Miller, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight is a big night. We are welcoming, we'll be swearing in board members, new and re-elected, and then we will turn to the organizational, the annual organization of our board. Starting with the oath of office. It is an honor that you were elected or appointed to guide the education of our community's children. As you recite the oath of office, you assume a tremendous responsibility as a director of our school district with the duties empowered by the Minnesota legislature. This power puts you and other members of our school board in the position of being both morally and legally responsible for equitable, quality education for every student in the district. In carrying out this responsibility, you will be asked to fulfill the roles of vision, structure, accountability, and advocacy. In providing vision, the board, with extensive participation of the community, envisions the community's educational future and then formulates the goals, defines the outcomes, and sets the course for our public schools. To achieve the vision, the board establishes a structure and creates an environment designed to ensure all students the opportunity to attain their maximum potential through a sound organizational framework. Because as a board, we must be accountable to the community, we must ensure a continuous assessment of student achievement and all conditions affecting the education of our children. As board members, we serve as education's key advocate and our community schools to advance the vision for our schools. Furthermore, we must strive to work together and with the superintendent and staff to lead the district toward fulfilling the vision we have created, fostering excellence for every student in the areas of academic skills and knowledge, citizenship, and personal development. Having signed the acceptance of office and oath of office, will you please publicly affirm your commitment by repeating the oath of office after me? Now, originally I had planned we were going to do this alphabetically, but I think we need to give Tony a minute to get her tech set. So we will actually start with Eric Miller. Eric, will you please repeat after me? I swear and affirm that
I swear and affirm that I
will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state,
and that I will discharge faithfully the duties of the office of school board member of Independent School District 191 to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you and congratulations. Next, we will turn to Sue Saeed. Sue, will you repeat after me, please? Raise your right hand. I swear and affirm
I swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States and of this state,
of the United States and of this state,
and that I will discharge faithfully
and that I will discharge faithfully
the duties of the office of school board member
the duties of the school board member
of Independent School District 191
of Independent School District 191
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you, and congratulations and welcome. Next, we will swear in Anna Werb. Anna? Just raise your right hand and I can't see you. Oh, there you are. Okay. I swear and affirm
I swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States and of this state,
of the United States and of this state,
and that I will discharge faithfully
and I will discharge faithfully
the duties of the office of school board member
the duties of the office of school board member
of Independent School District 191
of Independent School District 191
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you. Congratulations and welcome. And last but not least, Tony, I see that we can see you. Can you unmute yourself? Great. Now raise your right hand. I swear and affirm
I swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States and of this state,
of the United States and of this state,
and that I will discharge faithfully
and that I will discharge faithfully
the duties of the office of school board member
the duties of the office of school board member
of Independent School District 191
of Independent School District 191
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you. Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
Next, we will approve the agenda. I will take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Director Miller, second.
Second.
Seconded by Director Chester. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Holt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Hume, Hume, Miller,
Aye.
Said, Said,
We need to unmute Sue.
Aye.
Werb.
Aye.
And the motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will turn to the organizational meeting. The recommendation is to approve recommendations and adopt the resolutions shown below to accomplish organization of the Board of Education for 2021. The items listed below must be addressed by the school board at its organizational meeting on January 14th, 2021. In order of rank, the officers from 2020 are responsible for calling the organizational meeting to order. This individual or someone elected as temporary chair should preside until a new chair is elected. Prior to the election of officers, the board should determine the method to be used in selecting its new officers. A recommended method is that of majority vote on the candidate or candidates nominated for each position. Policy 202 provides further direction with respect to selection of officers and officers' responsibilities. The annual organization of the school board occurs in January to conform to the term of office for school board members. Some matters of school board organization are more readily conducted on a fiscal year basis and will be presented in June. The items that follow pertain to Board of Education organization for 2021. First, we have the election of chair. The chair presides at all school board meetings and works with the superintendent on calling board meetings and establishing meeting agendas. At times, the chair is called upon to serve in a ceremonial capacity as the ranking elected representative of the school district. The chair countersigns all checks drawn by the treasurer. I will now open up the floor for nominations for chair. And I would like to nominate Director Eric Miller as chair. Are there any other nominations for chair? Any other nominations for chair? Hearing none, Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Chester,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Hume, Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye. Can you hear
Werb,
me? Aye. Sorry.
Werb,
Aye.
and Alt.
Aye. And the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. We now have a new chair, and I will turn the meeting over to Chair Miller.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Alt. And before we get started, I think it's appropriate to take a moment and recognize that the role of the chair is one that goes largely unrecognized in this community, and the amount of time and effort that's put in addition to our normal board member duties. And Director Chair Alt has served 2 years in that role through probably some of the most tumultuous times in this district in recent times. So thank you, Chair Alt, for everything you've done. The amount of hours you put in the back scene have been amazing. This district is better off for your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I appreciate
Here,
it.
here.
And I would like to thank my fellow board members for the trust you put in me, and we will move forward with the rest of the meeting. The next function is to elect a vice chair. The school board created the vice chair position in 1989 for the purpose of easing the workload of the chair. The vice chair serves as chair when the chair is absent, assists with board operations, and plans the annual evaluation of the superintendent. At this time, I will ask if there is a nomination for vice chair.
I would like to nominate Director Chester as vice chair.
And I will, okay, thank you. I will ask if there are any other nominations for vice chair. And one more time, if there are any other nominations for vice chair. Hearing none, Ms. Kinney, will you please call the roll?
Connor, Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester.
Aye.
Excellent. The motion passes. Welcome aboard as Vice Chair Director Chester.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you, Chair Miller.
Thank you. The next function we have is the election of clerk. The clerk presides at board meetings in the absence of the chair and vice chair, and from a legal standpoint is responsible for board minutes, signing board-approved contracts, and calling school board elections. The clerk also countersigns all district checks. The routine duties of the clerk are performed by the superintendent's office and business office. I would ask if there is a motion, if anyone has a motion for the election of clerk.
I move to nominate Director Hume to clerk.
Excellent. Do we have any other nominations for clerk? And one last time, any further nominations for the election of clerk? Hearing none, Ms. Kenny, would you please call the roll?
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor.
Aye.
Excellent. Nomination passes, and welcome to the role of treasurer. All right, excuse me, of clerk. My apologies, I got ahead of my reading. The next action we need to take is an election of a treasurer. The treasurer is legally responsible for the deposit and withdrawal of all district funds and reporting same to the school board. Checks drawn on school district accounts are signed by the treasurer. The routine duties of the treasurer are performed by the business office. I will ask if there is a motion for a nomination for treasurer.
I'd like to nominate Director Alt to treasurer.
Excellent. I will ask if there is any additional nominations for treasurer. And one last time, any additional nominations for treasurer? Hearing none, Ms. Kenny, will you please proceed with the roll?
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Hume.
Aye.
Excellent. Congratulations on your election to treasurer. All right, next item on our agenda is salaries of board members. Salaries of school board members are set annually. In January 2016, the salaries were set at $550 per month for each director, plus an additional monthly stipend of $50 for the chair in recognition of increased duties and expenses associated with that position. On March 14th, 2019, the salaries were reduced by $100 per month beginning July 1st, 2019. The recommendation is that salaries of board members be set at $450 per month and that the chairperson receives an additional $50 per month in recognition of additional duties and expenses associated with the position. Cheryl, do I need to call for a motion or do we just call for a roll on the recommendation?
I believe it is just a roll call.
Okay.
We do need a first and a second for this. We need a first.
Oh, we
and a
do. Okay, then I will ask for a motion or for a first on the motion.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Oh, go ahead.
Second.
Moved by Director Alt and seconded by Director Hume. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller.
Aye. On to our next item, item number F on the agenda, regular meetings of the school board. Regular meetings of the school board are typically held on the second and fourth Thursday of each month. However, board meetings may be scheduled during other weeks to accommodate scheduling needs. Regular school board meetings will be held at Diamond Head Education Center, 200 West Burnsville Parkway, Burnsville. Recommendation that all regular meetings of the Independent School District 191 Board of Education commence at 6:30 p.m. on the dates noted below, with meetings conducted at the Diamond Head Education Center and Cablecast. Board listening sessions will be scheduled from 5:45 to 6:15 p.m. before regular board meetings. I'm just reading this last, okay, I don't think we need to read that. Details of the actual dates in the motion can be found in the associated documentation. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right. Motion by Director Chester and seconded by Director Hume. Ms. Kenny, please call the roll.
Verb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Courier. I'm sorry, Connor,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said.
Aye.
Very good. The next handful of items G through N, pertain to calendar year 2021. They are of routine nature, and although board action is required, discussion is usually unnecessary. I recommend approval of all resolutions as a single consent agenda. In the event a board member wishes to discuss any item, it should be removed from the list so that it may receive individual attention. I am going to quickly just read through the items that we are discussing, or that we are put forward as a consent. It includes authorization for electronic fund transfers, authorization for use of facsimile signatures, designation of official depositories, appointment to committees, authorization to execute and file application for state and federally funded programs, designation of legal counsel, designation of official newspaper, designation of identified official with authority for the MDE External User Access Recertification System. At this point, I'll ask, is there any request to remove them from the consent agendas for further discussion? Seeing no request, I will ask for a motion.
So moved.
And a second?
A second.
I'm sorry, who was that? That Tony?
Yep.
Yes.
Director
Mr. Connor? All right,
Yes.
very good. So moved by Director Alt and seconded by Director Connor. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Verb.
Aye.
Excellent. And that concludes the annual organization of the Board of Education component of our meeting this evening. With that, we will move forward to the next part of our meeting, which is the information section of our meeting. Beginning with receiving an update about District 191's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance issued by the MDE and the MDH, respectively. This section will be handled by Dr. Battle. Dr. Battle, you may go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Good evening, Chair Miller and directors of the board. Tonight, I will share information related to the primary areas of our work in response to COVID-19, health and safety, academics, which we will highlight through a presentation about our shift to a hybrid or in-person learning model, including operational preparations. I begin first with health and safety updates through the Minnesota Department of Health. So we receive reports on COVID-19 reports from the Minnesota Department of Health. Most important is looking at our county confirmed cases for every 10,000 residents. And so I begin with the report that was issued today. It represents the time period from December 20th through January 2nd. So there's always a 2-week delay in these confirmed case numbers. Dakota County is at 44.88 and Scott County is at 42.83. These numbers were corrected from our earlier release this morning, which had Dakota at 40.0 and Scott at 38.22. During this afternoon Scott County Public Health meeting with Lisa Brodsky, Public Health Director, she shared the correct number for the county. As a reminder, learning model parameters vary for elementary, and for our district, that would be K through 5th grade, and then secondary, which are inclusive of grade 6 through grade 12. We are also to use the county numbers because we serve 2 counties. We are to use the number of from the county with the highest number of confirmed cases. And so this means that for our secondary students, we would still be continuing with the distance learning for students. However, there has been a change since the last Governor Walz's executive order and updated Minnesota Safe Learning Plan, which was issued on December 16th. I would like to highlight some of those changes because there are different criteria to use for elementary learning models. Per the executive order, elementary schools' learning models are not required to be closely tied to county case rates. Elementary schools are allowed to change to hybrid or in-person learning models as early as January 18th. If districts are moving to a hybrid or an in-person model, schools must use a rolling start for elementary, welcoming back a few grades at a time. In other words, as an example, grades pre-K2 could start on January 18th, followed by grades 3-5 on February 1st. Athletics and activities can resume in-person practices as early as January 4th, and so we have begun with our activities. Couple of highlights that our lead school nurse, Bernadette Bean, and I will share as a part of the health update. So I will invite Bernie at this time. I'm going to go through a few more updates, health updates that we have received since that executive order. And then more information will be provided in the presentation. The first topic is about the personal protective equipment, PPEs. School districts and charter schools are strongly encouraged to require staff operating in person or hybrid learning to wear face masks and face shields together whenever possible during the school day as an important additional health and safety precaution to prevent against the spread of COVID-19. Strongly encourage is a change from the original executive order issued by Governor Walz. Previously, it was a stipulation that it was required. I am strongly recommending that I do require that school staff that work directly with students to wear both face masks and a face shield, with the exception of bus drivers due to a driving hazard, staff for which students must see their lips move, and food service employees when working in the kitchen preparing meals. The COVID-19 Advisory Committee supports this requirement also, and I will turn it over to Bernie to explain the why behind our recommendation. Bernie?
Thank you, Dr. Battle. So we have to remember that initially it was a required recommendation in the executive order, and that was based on a couple issues, a couple facts. One, when they do data collection in our facilities, our businesses that wear both a face mask and a face shield, they found that the transmission rates were significantly lower when a face shield was not on. The other reason is that the face shield is a protection for your face mask, and your eyes. Droplets can still get on your face mask. And by protecting that, we are keeping you safer from touching a contaminated mask and then touching your eyes and touching other objects. We also know that we do have employees right now that do wear a face mask and a face shield. It's required in the health office from the very beginning if you are working with children that are ill. We also provide face shields and a better quality face mask for our staff that work with students on a very close basis where they're needing some personal cares. So wearing both of them isn't foreign in our buildings, but that's the reason why it was initially required and why we still feel in our district it should still be required as a strong safety mitigation effort. Thank you.
I also want to share that districts and charter schools will receive additional masks and shields from the state, and school leaders must provide them to staff. There were face covering requirements under that last executive order 20-81 that remain in effect. David Lake, who is our director of operations, has reported that we have ordered our own face shields to provide for both elementary and secondary. And we will be sending 200 to each elementary school, approximately 400 to each secondary school, and also a supply to Diamond Head Education Center, River Ridge Education Center, and Burnsville Alternative High School. MDE, Minnesota Department of Education, and Minnesota Department of Health shared with nurses and superintendents that the state issued PPP is available for pickup today and tomorrow. It includes both face masks for students and staff. Also, the face mask shields, face shields available are leftover ones from fall, which were less quality. The better quality face shields manufactured by Anderson Windows will be available February 15th. So this is one of the reasons once there might be a change, we ordered our own. So we would make sure if by February 1st, bringing back elementary students, we would have the additional mitigation strategy of the PPE. Also, we have received updates about another additional vaccine, about the vaccines. So Dakota County has asked if our district is interested in partnering with them to offer a vaccine clinic. And then Bernie can give you a little bit more information about that. We are in a different tier after health professionals. And Bernie and Stephanie will give you more information about that. We have to have the first 1A completed before they will move on to educational staff in most cases. So Bernie, did you have anything to add before I turn it over to Brian Gersich for the presentation about the vaccines or the PPE at this time?
There is a slide in that presentation on vaccines. I can wait until then, or I can present it now.
You can wait until then.
Okay.
Okay. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Brian Gersich and staff, who will share information about our plans to shift to a hybrid or in-person learning, distance learning plus, new mitigation strategies, as you just heard about, updates for Project Kids, PALS, Partners Achieving Learning Success, BYC, the Burnsville Youth Collaborative, transportation, food service, and athletics and activities. I will turn it over to, oh, excuse me. Please, I need to set some context first. Aaron, could you hold on thank you. So as some of you know, we did survey our staff, our parents, if they wanted to opt out. So I wanted to give you a little bit of context for this work before we get into the presentation. We did ask parents to let us know if they wanted to change their students' learning model choice for second semester, for instance, to go from the district's learning model hybrid, distance, or in person to virtual academy, which is the 100% online option. Many parents did request a change, and that means shifting class assignments, schedules, transportation, and much more, even if the net change was not overwhelming. Across all elementary schools, the net result for request was 125 students choosing the district model of in-person, hybrid or distance learning, and moving away from the virtual academy. At the middle school level, Virtual Academy saw a net increase of 28 students. At the high school, Virtual Academy saw a net increase of 34 students. So at the secondary level, more students are moving to 100% online, while at the elementary level, more students will be attending in person. And so as of January 11th, just wanted to give you some percentages of the different grade levels. So for grade 9, 12, we have about 40% in VA, choosing VA, stay with that. Hybrid in person, almost 60% at 59.42. Grade 6, 8 for Virtual Academy, 40.30%. Hybrid or in person, 59.7. For our K-5 Virtual Academy, 32.36%, and for hybrid in-person, 67.64%. And now I'll turn it over to Brian. Thank you so much for waiting, Brian and Aaron.
All right, thank you very much, Chair Miller. I'm looking at you. Can you just thumbs up if you can hear me okay and you're seeing my screen? Thank you very much. And thank you, Chair Miller, Board of Directors and Superintendent Battle for this opportunity to talk through a lot of the work that's gone into planning shifts in learning models during the COVID-19 pandemic. When I say the learning models, there are 3 options that we were given by the state of Minnesota for different degrees of COVID-19 rates in our community. That would be full in-person, full distant learning, and a hybrid of the 2. And again, as outlined by Dr. Battle, we've got a presentation tonight that talks through a lot of some of the updates. So she's already kind of listed those off and I won't be redundant, but what we're going to start with is a little bit of a process and a review of what are we doing when we shift those different learning models. And so this is just kind of a summary of what I'm going to talk through, which is that process development and how we really worked to plan with partners and develop some common language to guide our process in preparing for and implementing shifts in those learning models, depending on rates of infection of COVID-19. We're going to talk a little bit about the process of what we've been planning for. We started the school year in hybrid. In November, based on increased cases for COVID, we switched to distant learning. And immediately after that, as you'll see through our presentation, we started planning for the eventual return to hybrid or in-person learning, depending on those rates. When we went into the fall with hybrid, we just had a feeling that when we were listening to public health experts, we were expecting spikes in COVID cases in the fall. We immediately began planning for what we saw as the potential inevitable, so we were ready to make those changes. And so that's where I say we're going to talk about the planning that we've been doing recently for that return by talking about some of those reflections of that first shift when we went from hybrid to distant learning and some of the complexities of the second move, as well as some of our next steps. What I want to point out is what I'm presenting to you is an implementation of a process. It's not about the why are we making those changes. Dr. Battle started to talk about that a little bit. What I wanted to bring back, and board members who've been with us have seen our decision-making framework before. This was heavily used during our facilities planning process last year, but just in talking through the top portion of this framework. And again, this is just how decisions are made and implemented within our system. And when you think about the very top of this, we're here with the options team or the design team. That really was the Department of Education who continues to tell us what our options are: in-person learning, distant learning, and hybrid learning. And what Dr. Battle talked about before was how she gets voice, stakeholder voice, input from the community, her COVID advisory team, as well as other inputs that we get from the community, from teachers and staff and public and community members, that advise or consult on that decision. The choice maker, or the actual person making the decision as to which model we have, is Dr. Battle as our superintendent, as authority that was given to her by the school board. So it's really between Dr. Battle and the school board are the ones who actually choose which model we're going to go into. And again, we have guidance from the state of Minnesota, but it really was that resolution of the school board back in August that gave Dr. Battle the permission and the authority to make those decisions. After the decision is made to change, so when in November, Dr. Battle made the decision and recommended that we change to a distant learning model because COVID cases were rising, that's when district administration, operations, instructional staff, and all of our teams came together to implement and refine, to do that work. And this is, again, what the presentation is about, is how do we do that work? How are we prepared for those decisions that are made so that we can implement those changes in learning models? In reflecting this fall, things went really well. And I think a lot of our team were really pleased with how we did that very strategic and measured start to the school year. We like to think it went so well that the state stole our idea. And as they put in new parameters for the winter changes, this is really what they call their rolling start. We called it a strategic start, in that we brought various grade levels back in to make sure that we were prepared as we brought students back into the building this fall as a part of hybrid learning. In spite of how things went well, the team feedback really said, we know we can improve. And I just appreciate working with a team of people that always says, no matter how well things go, we can improve and we can continue to learn and do better. A part of that is really what we talked about as a team of partner planning, which you'll see layered throughout the work we've done from November to the more recent, or October, excuse me, versus parallel planning. And if those with children, you've heard about cooperative play versus parallel play. Working together with those blocks, but two kids that are there building something together, or two kids that are maybe playing next to each other, but aren't necessarily interacting with one another. And that's just kind of an analogy for, we really wanted to make sure this time around, we were working better with our partners and working together to communicate. And that's a big part of what you're going to see through this process as well, is how we really tried to shore up our communication, particularly between departments. And this is where I just want to thank Dave Lake, a member of our operations team and a director of our buildings, grounds, transportation, and many other things, as well as Amina Aftadal, our director of curriculum instruction and assessment. They were what we were calling champions in this process, where Dave helped to make sure he was a champion and a spokesperson for our operations team. Amina through our instructional side, to make sure if anybody ever had a question, we're coming together to make sure that we're getting answers to those kinds of things. So again, thanking them for their work and their leadership through this process as well. What was also instrumental through our process was developing some common language. And some of our current board members have heard this before, but we used an airplane or an air flight analogy through this process. And as we were planning, so when we began planning in October, well before making the shift to distant learning, we talked about developing pre-flight plans or pre-flight checklists. Those are all the things that we could do in advance. Don't wait for these things. Make a list of all the stuff we can do for that inevitable shift to distant learning from hybrid. Don't wait, start working on those things now. We're not going to wait for a decision. We're going to prepare for the decision so that we are not reacting. We're being a proactive team. Then we also developed our in-flight checklists, our in-flight plans. We only waited to do things that we had to wait to do. And so as an example, we knew that we were going to be having, what is my example? The class lists. When we were going to be shifting from our hybrid learning, we had smaller classes because of the need for social distancing. And when we were going to shift to distant learning, we knew that that was going to require some shifting of our class sizes. In the pre-flight process, it was really about identifying what are those class lists going to look like? What do our staffing changes look like? But an in-flight process was actually making those roll over into the computer system. And so we did everything we could on the front end and only waited for those things that had to. And then post-flight review was really afterwards reflecting what went well, what can we do better, and let's start planning for the next shift. When we made the shift to distant learning, the next week, we started planning for the eventual return. That shift to distant learning was really over a month of planning. We started in mid-October planning for the inevitable, and it was November before we made those shifts. It was a relatively smooth change. We got great feedback about the partnership and communication. I think our teams felt really good about how we worked together. Again, nothing went wrong in the summer, but these kinds of things went much better for us as we were communicating. We certainly had reflections that talked about how this was a stressful shift. It was a stressful time. COVID cases are going up. That in and of itself creates some anxiety. And those shifts, changing teachers, changing assignments, those things caused stress and anxiety throughout our system. It really helped our team realize the importance of leadership throughout that process, something we continue to talk about as we've been reflecting and moving forward too. Then as we began planning, again, shortly thereafter for that return to hybrid, we also knew that there were going to be additional complications as we were coming into this new semester. Enrollment, as Dr. Battle said on the front end, we asked our families in the summer to commit to one of those learning models. Did they want our virtual academy, full distant learning, or were they looking for the model that would shift with COVID cases, distant learning, hybrid, or full in-person? There was the opportunity to make some of those changes. And as Dr. Battle said, some of those net changes, like 125 students, I believe it was, that are changing from virtual academy to our in-person learning. We have master schedule changes in the middle school and high school, a rebuilt second semester schedule. We still utilized pre-flight, in-flight, and post-flight planning as a part of this process, but we added another layer this most recent turn, which is what we called our dependent items. A dependent item is something where we have a member of our team that has a task that can't begin until somebody else completes a task. And a big part of our work was to figure out what those were and backwards map from a target date of February 1st to return to learning so we could make sure we could get things done on time. So for example, as we were registering students for that second semester, we needed those to be completed so that principals could evaluate the potential changes to either cohorts or to our in-person and staffing so we could get that information to Dave Lake and the transportation team to redraw transportation routes. Dave needed a certain amount of time, so if he needed 3 weeks to draw those routes, we needed to backwards map for the principals to get him the class list of who's going to need that transportation and who's coming in. So again, it was really a very concerted effort to identify and prioritize things based on dependent items or who had to get done work done in advance. So again, as soon as we made the shift to distant learning, we started meeting in early December to start creating those checklists. And we do have a level of confidence in our preparedness to be able to launch and be ready to go on February 1st, which is what we're talking about for that return to in-person learning. I'll talk more about that in just 1 second, but what you see also on the bottom of that slide is just the example of what a pre-flight checklist looked like for us. In the first column, you've got an identification of what is the item that needs to be done. Then you've got a description of that item, who is responsible or who is leading that process, as well as identifying partners or resources that are needed to complete that task. And as we've gone through this process, and we're on probably about our 7th meeting since October in doing these different things, one of our meetings was for every member of the group, 20 people coming to our planning meetings from various departments across our district, to read through all of those pre-flight lists. And every meeting we go through all of the dependent items to make sure we're all aware of what's there, who needs a partner and in which area, and just the general planning of backwards mapping and monitoring and maintaining our timelines. As we talk about part of that process, and again, I'll refer back to Dr. Battle talking about, it was January 6th that we asked our families to give their potential changes to our learning models, which started the conversation with principals about staffing changes and what it's going to look like to take that net 125 students that are shifting from virtual to in-person. And then it was a matter of taking a look at the models of what that's going to look like for elementary in-person. And so one of the things that we determined for that return is that, yes, we will have elementary students returning with that shift starting February 1st to 5 days a week of in-person, but maintaining the hybrid bell schedule. So that means in the hybrid model bell schedule, the students at 2:55 we're taking the buses home, and that last hour of the day was asynchronous learning for our specialists to provide instruction. There's a number of benefits to that as we look at that shift. Certainly, it limits the number of adults going into each of what we call the pods. Every classroom is a pod, and if we can limit the additional interactions within that, it helps ensure the safety of our adults as well as our students to limit and minimize some of that interaction. It supports a lot of the scheduling complexities like specialist instructional time, win time, teacher preparations, et cetera. Helps us maintain some of our transportation costs because we are also planning as a district for the return of our middle school and high school at some point to hybrid learning, which will bring in some transportation times and making sure that our start and dismissal times are maintained with a sense of distance so as not to lengthen some of those. It certainly allows some of our specialists to provide sub coverage when we have potential quarantines. When a teacher enters into a possible close contact or they themselves come down with COVID, that is an extended potential absence of 14 days that we need to plan for that sometimes can create some complexities with subs. It allows our targeted services to start and end on time, which is beneficial both for families, for those enrolled in targeted services, as well as the staffing pieces of those as well. And it is also going to offer us some opportunities for saliva testing for our adults. So again, many pieces to that information that just kind of became available. That's why you don't necessarily see these as a talking point as a slide, is because it was really an effort of developing some of that after we got the registrations in, as well as making sure that our principals were working with their leadership teams to gather feedback on what is this going to look like and how does this benefit. Last piece for me, and then I'll move on to the team with some of those other reports, is just kind of some of our next steps. Certainly after we make the shift, when we are done moving our elementary students to in-person and of certainly preparing our middle school and high school, when COVID numbers permit that we can return them to hybrid, we will have our post-flight review. And when middle school and high school potentially shift to hybrid or in-person, there's two places they can go after that, depending on what COVID numbers look like. So we need to prepare for yet another shift, because after middle school, high school come into hybrid, if COVID numbers go up, they could be shifting back to distant learning. If COVID numbers go down, we could be shifting back to in-person. This is just a regular process that we're going to have to continue to go through. Certainly then monitoring health and safety and those numbers and our advisory teams to talk about what other things can we do. Again, in that description, it's implementation and refinement, and of course, continued communication throughout this process, which has been instrumental. At this time, I'm also going to do then is allow some members of our team to come forward. As indicated earlier by Bernie Bean, we've got some additional information on slides too. And I'll invite Stephanie White.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, board. Welcome, new board members. Good evening, Superintendent Battle. I'm here tonight to give you an update on our Distance Learning Plus portion of our plan. We are calling Distance Learning Plus the opportunity for students who are really experiencing no benefit to distance learning or very little benefit to distance learning. Under the right conditions, the opportunity to come back into school. And our first two lenses we look through is, of course, first health and safety. And the second is the availability of staff to provide the services that the student is needing. We have been working on this plan since November and December, and then have circled back around with teams right after winter break. We have been trying to identify students who have intensive needs, who have the need for some targeted services. We're going to begin with very small numbers starting on the 19th and slowly rolling them in. We do provide transportation for them as they come in. Of course, it is health and safety is our top priority, and so we're making sure that we have all of our plans in place in order to do that. Many of the students that we're considering are students who receive special education, but this opportunity is not limited to those students. This is available to all of our students, and thankfully we have most students benefiting from distance learning. And so teams, IEP teams, individual education program teams, And then teams within the building are identifying who this would work best for. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to my partner in crime, Bernie Bean.
Thank you. So I get the pleasure of talking about these two new exciting mitigation strategies that became available to us with the new executive order and the update to the Safe Learning Plan. You know, saliva, and if I would redo this slide, I would already change the testing to screening. We are providing a saliva screening to employees. Screening is, the intent of a screening is to capture those asymptomatic positive COVID individuals. And a staff member that has symptoms or is seeking testing due to a close contact, they would be using our community sites for that. So a screening means they're healthy and we're ruling out whether they are asymptomatic positive. It is optional. The Safe Learning Plan also says that when a school declares hybrid or in person, that's when that can be rolled out to that site. So February 1st, we will start implementing the saliva screening on our elementary schools and our Diamond Head Education Center. Each building has formed a saliva screening team, and the LSN and the principal are doing the educational pieces to that team. We're getting all of our supplies. There's a lot of logistics we're still working out. We also will be providing this service, this optional service to our bus services, and they will be invited to come for the screening also. Vaccines, that is a rapidly changing piece also. But I have to say, I think what we're doing shows the strong partnership that we have with both Scott County and Dakota County. They have been amazing to work with, and they are really keeping us up to date on everything we need to know. When the two vaccines that are licensed under the emergency authorization use became available, part of the charge of CDC was to develop who is in those priority groups. And so they came up with some guidelines, and each state had to figure out how to implement those guidelines. Right now for Minnesota, there are 3 phases, and each phase has subgroups. Phase 1 really pertains to healthcare providers, long-term care residents. But that's a really broad term. So each phase has more subgroups. Right now, 1A, subgroup 3, has been opened up to include health service staff. We also learned that that definition of health service staff is expanding a little bit and will include, hopefully soon, our saliva testing, our saliva screening teams in our buildings. Last week, half of our school nurses, our school health service staff, received their first dose from Scott County, and next week, the rest of them will receive their first dose. Something as far as 1B and schools, they're in the next phase. Also with schools is the general group of adults over the age of 75. MDH is still detailing out what those sub-priority groups are, but my understanding is school is high in that subgroup. So more details will come when we know those, and Stephanie and I have been quickly rolling out that information and giving those invites to the people that need those invitations to sign up for vaccination. Something new on the MDH website is the vaccine data dashboard, and that will let you know how many individuals completed 1 dose, how many have completed both doses, how many doses are being shipped to Minnesota. I was pleasantly surprised today when I looked at it, because yesterday there were 7,000 Minnesota residents that completed the whole series, and today it doubled. So Our counties, our state are working really hard to get that vaccine out to everybody that wants it. That's what I have.
We have Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services, that will cover areas of her responsibility.
Thank you, and welcome to all new board members. Thank you to our current board members and Superintendent Battle for the opportunity to also share on our Project Kids, PALS, and BYC. As you can see on the slide included here, it's a pretty detailed information slide of what people can expect. Our Project Kids program has been functioning at our Marion W. Savage Elementary and Sioux Trail Elementary locations. And when we transition, there are 3 days in which those 3 days, 2 of them are going to be for them to move back into the elementary schools. And one of those days we will still remain open for childcare. So you can see that on January 27th. Once we reach February 1st, and our plan is right now until the end of the school year, our Project Kids childcare will continue to provide care for the K through 2nd grades, and will be open at each of the elementary schools before and after school. At Project Kids will provide during the dates of February 1st through the 12th, the care for grades 3 through 5 at the Marion W. Savage Elementary and Sioux Trail Elementary locations. February 15th until this end of the school year, then all grades K through 5 would be cared for at the elementary schools before and after school. Our Project Kids summary programs would plan to begin June 16th through August 27th. We also have a PALS and BYC programming that exists and is planned to be running through May 5th on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for our K through 5 PALS program, and our grades 6 through 8 BYC program would run through May 5th as well on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The times are to be determined just because they will follow after the school hours, and we wanted to make sure we understood those times first before publishing them. Currently, we have 351 students enrolled in PALS and the BYC programming. And from there, I will invite the next slide to be covered by Dave Lake, Operations, Properties, and Transportation Director.
Good evening, Dr. Battle, Board Chair Miller, and all of the new board members. We've received great feedback from families regarding learning model choices for second semester. With changes in MDH health guidance, we have increased bus capacities. I must note in the last week alone, these numbers have changed from what you're seeing before you. Full-size buses will be set at a capacity of 45, and Type A or small buses will be set at 10. We'll keep the first 2 seats behind the driver and the first seat opposite the bus driver open. Routes are created primarily on 2 criteria, and that's elementary in-person learning numbers and maximizing our current bus fleet. Although we have determined capacities, we're also working to keep buses as safe as possible by evenly distributing students and keeping numbers more conservative. You can expect on all buses that we will be prioritizing health and safety. Face masks will be provided, roof hatch and windows cracked open for ventilation, as well as cleaning and disinfecting between routes. Assigned seats and attendance will be taken by district staff, and District 191 will also review bus routes each week with the goal of creating as much space between riders as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. I will also now speak to our food services programs. As we move into this planning, it's quite the challenge to consider serving not only our students who will be in person at elementary level, but also the curbside needs for our community in general. As you see, free meals will continue to be available for children ages 1 through 18 through the summer food service program, which is unique for this school year, and we're appreciative of that. Weekly, we have our curbside meal pickup at Eagle Ridge Middle School, Nicollet Middle School, and we will be moving that to Sioux Trail Elementary from the Ron location on Wednesdays. It will be from 11 to 12:30 p.m. for those distance learners. This would take place as we transition into the in-person at the elementary level. We do have some home delivered meals that will continue for those that may have some medical or transportation needs. And if that is an issue for you or your family, please know you can always call and we can arrange for that coverage. So that is something that is available to all community members. Due to the weather, I will just mention that as a note for tomorrow, that we instead packaged enough food to get families through Monday, which allows for that to take place. But for tomorrow's curbside, that will be canceled for buses. And if you need food for the weekend and are not able to get, we're not able to get it today, please just feel free to contact us at our main office here, extension 2080. That concludes our discussion of food service. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple more slides here. Dr. Battle had already mentioned this earlier about our athletics and activities, which did return to participation and practice on January 4th. We certainly continue to monitor COVID data. We do have a committee, and for newer board members or those who want to just review from the public, back at the November 12th board meeting, our activities director, Jay Lepper, as well as our athletic director, Guillaume Pack, did present that dial system, so there's a better understanding of what goes into that. But on Thursdays, when that new COVID data comes out from Department of Health that shares all of the county numbers and cases per 10,000, that team meets. That team is made up of health representatives, district administrators, and site level administrators to make a determination and recommendation as to where we set those dials. That team did meet again today, and starting next week have established those dials at a 5 for our activities, which basically means full participation. They are fully participating in games and events right now, but that also means that we have a limited number of spectators, which comes down to essentially 2 per participant in events. And so again, that dial setting starting on Monday is the recommendation of that group. The last thing I will say before thanking the board is just in general, kind of as we go through this process, I want people to understand, my appreciation for this entire team and the work together, but we've really had to make things adaptable as we go through. MDE guidance and Department of Health guidance changes repeatedly. And over the course of 10 days from when MDE had put out some guidance, there were 8 to 10 changes in that. And just in this presentation alone, Bernie Bean talked about one, Dave Lake talked about one. I know all members of our team could talk about them. So just understanding when the public comes in and says, why might things change or otherwise, they change on us frequently just within the guidance, much less the information that we're talking about and the complexities of a lot of the changes that we've been making. So with that, I thank the board for this opportunity to present, and I will turn it back to Chair Miller for determining next steps.
Thank you, Superintendent Battle, Assistant Superintendent Kursich, Ms. Bean, Ms. Ryder, and Mr. Lake for your presentation this evening. We will open it up for board comments and questions. I'd ask you if you could please to use the raise hand function within Zoom. If you don't know you're doing that yet, feel free to actually raise your hand and that'll be fine. Anybody have any comments or questions for the presentation? Dr. Hume has his hand raised. Please speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, good. I changed the earbuds, so hopefully this will help now. I had a couple of questions. My first is, I think for Stephanie, you had talked about the Distance Learning Plus program and saying that there are students that are being identified who need additional support. And you mentioned some special ed students were in that category, but I was curious how other students are being identified as being eligible for this particular program.
Good question. So we've worked with teams and worked with our neighboring districts to come up with a screening tool that we use. There's a series of 7 questions that we use to help identify who those kids are. And again, I want to say, our teachers are amazing, our students and families are amazing, and we have very few kids who start with no benefit. But because this is requires lots of detail and lots of service. We're starting with those kids who are identified who have very little benefit to distance learning, and then working with their families and the teams in the school to see what we can do to improve that. Because families do have the opportunity to keep their kids home, it just opens up that conversation to work as a team to figure out how we can give, all kids better access. But we have a series of 7 questions that starts with that and then goes on to, if they're experiencing homelessness or transitional home, housing, if they have health and medical conditions that prevent them from coming into the school and so on. They're pretty universal questions that we're using across the area.
Okay, thank you. I was just concerned that I think we've all seen stories in the news of concerns from schools across the country that students may be slipping through the cracks. And then so I was just curious what we are doing to make sure that's not happening. So
Yep. And
thank you.
Yeah, well, and just to say again, we ask those questions too, just using the same wording. Who are the kids that are falling through the cracks? Who do we not know is there? And those numbers, to the credit of our staff, are very, very small. And even though we haven't seen them for days and days and days, the teams are still implementing strategies to try and locate those. And we get contacted by districts around the state. I personally get contacted by the state around the state, probably 2 or 3 a day. Social workers reaching out, trying to help us locate kids. If kids are living in our district and are attending somewhere else, we're helping them do well family checks or well student checks, and then they would do the same for us there. So it's a huge effort happening, I think, across the state.
Definitely. Thank you. I have 2 more questions, if I may. Bernie, I know you said this, but could you re-explain the difference between saliva testing and saliva screening? I didn't quite fully grasp what the difference was between the 2.
Testing means it's a diagnostic procedure. Somebody has symptoms, they're going to have a diagnosis. Screening means we're just, there's no symptoms. So it's just a general screening. Like we would do like a hearing screening. We're not doing it for somebody that we know has a hearing loss. We're doing a general screening.
Thank you. And then my last question is for, I guess this is probably for Brian, but it could really be for anybody. And that's, the school year is halfway over, and I applaud everyone on this call for all the incredible work that has been done in the first half of the school year. But I get my question is, what do you think are some of the things that you've learned in this first half of the school year that can be applied to help the second half of the school year perhaps go even more smoothly in spite of all the ongoing uncertainties?
Yeah, that's a complicated question. I'll certainly invite others to kind of jump in as well. A big part of what I'm here describing that I would say about it is process, related. There's a lot of things about this process that we've continued to learn. And I will say, not just taking us forward through COVID, but just taking us into the future. There's been a lot of collaboration that has improved as a part of what we've been doing as a part of the concerted effort. And when I say that, I mean really breaking down department by department and creating teams and partnerships. As we talked about before, partnership planning versus parallel planning. And so I know that might not be, the interesting result when it comes down to what are we learning about educational opportunities and things, because certainly I was talking earlier today with Rachel Gorton about how there's certain things we've learned about in the use of technology from an instructional perspective that we'll never go back on, that we might not have ever discovered if not for all of the things that we've gone through. But again, really because of just where my mind is as a part of this process, I fully expect that we're going to have a team in District 191 that works together like we never have before because of how we've learned through this process. And we've talked about kind of even just our common language, well, it's also common planning, and we start to know who our partners are even better for certain things. And I just have been really pleased with the communication that's happened, and again, those partnerships that have been forced. So not forced, excuse me, developed and created. Forced is such a negative connotation word there. People have willingly come to the table to develop these things. And so again, I'm not sure if others want to talk about the different perspectives of what's been learned, but that's kind of where I would go with that question based on tonight.
I would add to that the two things, the collaboration that's happening that we're seeing, the communication around that, and include our community and our families in that. You know, we've had to come together to tables and created just such a great dynamic team for the betterment of students and their learning. And so it's very powerful. It's very effective. When you get a dynamic team with multiple perspectives coming around, considering that whole child, there's really great things happening for kids.
If I could also just share a perspective instructionally, the collaboration instructionally with technology and through the leadership of Rachel Gordon, we have really been able to make leaps and bounds of how we use technology as a tool to enhance our instruction. And as we move forward next year, we will use those enhancements in a variety of ways. Our staff is also learning to take down the barriers of the brick and mortar, be able to expand and use our time and our space differently to reach out and group students in different ways and connect students and teachers in different ways. And so that's part of the long-term gains that I think we've learned, and using some of those tools to the benefit of our students and how to really look at delivering services in multiple ways.
That's
Excellent.
fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent. And before we proceed, Ms. White, please accept my apologies for my oversight and not recognizing your contribution to this presentation. I see that Director Alt has her hand raised. Please feel free to proceed.
Thank you. Yes, I always appreciate this report because it's never dull, it's never the same. It's similar. And I always learn something from all of you. One thing that I did, I wanted to make sure didn't get lost in the shuffle is the guidance from MDE and how it changes regularly. And, you know, I know that for our families, sometimes, you know, there might be frustration or confusion over how and why the changes are being made and with what timing, but it really is, you know, Dr. Battle and her staff reacting as best as possible to those changing guidelines and simply doing their best to, you know, to serve our students. Two questions. Dave, I think one question for you. You had mentioned cleaning the buses in between rides. Is that something that our custodians do, or is that something that the bus drivers do?
That is something that the bus drivers do, Schmitty and Sons. So in between each route, they either on site or depending upon the time of day and the time of the route, they'll bring it back to the shop and they wipe down the seats, and then they use something similar to what our district uses, disinfectant sprayer, and fog the buses for the disinfectant portion, but they take care of that.
Awesome, thank you. And then I guess just thinking logistically, and I'm not sure, probably this goes to Brian, in terms of coordinating activities and knowing that each district has its own, I imagine, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but each district probably has its own setting, dial setting. And so how do we know as our families are going from place to place and we have other families coming here, you know, how do they know that they're actually going to be able to attend?
Yeah, good question. You are correct in that while a lot of our partners in the conference have shared the dial system and have very similar ones, our numbers aren't the same, our approaches aren't the same, strategic and measured as opposed to maybe more aggressive in some different communities. I will say to Guillaume Pack, who's our athletic director, who is regularly communicating with the high school league and with our conference neighbors, have a great communication system. And so again, when you look at it from the perspective of, we initially set our dials for this week based on last week's information at a 4, meaning that we did not have spectators to start our events. That was communicated with Mr. Pack to those opponents that we had through our coaches as well as through our ADs to make sure people realized what are our expectations. Because to your point too, even though we may have spectators, our entrance procedures might be different. And I will say that those, when we do have spectators, all members of our conference right now, I believe, are following the same system in that our spectators have to be pre-screened, pre-approved. Those names and lists are created before people show up. So the process to get those names added so we know who is attending those events is all done in advance. So there's a lot of work and communication that happens through the conference as a part of that process to make sure that we all know, not just our spectators allowed, but what are the rules when we enter, depart, which doors are we coming in, which doors are we going out? All of those kinds of things are different mitigation efforts during crowd control kinds of events.
Great, thank you. That it's a lot. Well, I think, yep, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments for the presenters this evening? Okay, well, I don't have any questions, but I just want to continue the observation of the amount of heavy lifting that's gone into everything that you guys have accomplished this year. It's, you know, you have to remember under every bullet point, there's endless meetings and teams of people working on things and across the district. So my hat's off to all of you and everyone that's working so hard on this in our district. Thank you. All right, we will now move to the student representative report section of our meeting. Our student representative, Milkami Adisu, you may step forward to the microphone, so to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Welcome.
Hello, board. Settling back into an academic mode after our winter break has been seemingly easy for many BHS students. However, recent events at the Capitol have left students concerned and distracted from the daily class routine. But amazing teachers like Ms. Millay, who teaches my CAS literature class, and Mrs. Coleman, who teaches my CAS American Government and Politics class, have made it their mission to create a safe space for students to voice their frustrations and worries. These teachers have really emphasized the importance of discussion, especially on topics that concern the threat against Black lives and American lives in general. Every day, us BHS students continue to challenge the systems put into place with the intent to diminish the prosperity of minorities in America. And we are extremely lucky to have uplifting and attentive teachers that care for our thoughts and feelings. Additionally, BHS seniors had a quick senior meeting this past Tuesday discussing the college process and graduation. Our seniors are actively working with Counsel and teachers to create a stable life after high school. Though we wish we could be back in classrooms and receiving a diploma on stage in person, we are just grateful and excited to be working for a life outside of high school. That is all for my report. Thank you.
Thank you. And you did an excellent job. Next time I would actually encourage you to shout out your presentation. You were a little low, but otherwise excellent job. Sometimes we have to speak a little bit louder in these environments. Now we will move to the portion of our meeting for the superintendent report. Dr. Battle, I will turn it over to you for your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Miller and members of the board. Tonight, I would like to talk about two different topics, but the focus is the same for both topics, our students. First, I want to celebrate our students and their incredible commitment to serving others, even during a global pandemic. In December, Youth Services Coordinator Courtney Floback shared with me that 109 students at Burnsville High School had volunteered more than 2,000 combined hours of service since June 1st. That service has qualified 12 of our students for national awards through the Interview Impact Awards program, 5 of whom are contenders for the Presidential Service Award. In her message to me, Ms. Flowback shared how incredibly proud she is of these students and how they inspire her. Well, they inspire me too. So often, especially when things are difficult, we just need to look at our students and be reminded of why we do what we do. The awesome responsibility and amazing privilege that we have as an education community. When I hear about their commitment to service, I know we're on the right path. Secondly, I want to talk briefly about the message I sent out following last week's attack on the U.S. Capitol, and especially about the responses I received from staff and community members. I want to truly thank those who wrote in to share their thoughts with me, whether they felt the same as me or if they disagreed. I believe wholeheartedly in the importance of dialogue. I learn from others, and hearing their voices helps me better understand our community members' experiences, and that informs my thinking and my decision making. And that's important because at the end of the day, this is not about me. I've learned from the feedback, it is about our students. Thankfully, I was fortunate enough to hear from some of our students too, following last week's event. As Milka May shared, students experienced that and wanted some time to express their feelings and to unpack it. So several students contacted me too. So there were a group of students who sent an email with their reactions and with some requests. They made it clear that the events of the past year have been incredibly difficult for them as they deal with a global pandemic, the social isolation that comes with it, social unrest, a contentious election, and now an attack on our country's capital. These things are causing stress, but that stress is not being mitigated, they shared with me. In their words, what they need is not to hear that everything is going to get better. What they need from us is time, guidance, and the opportunity to process their emotions. So I'm so grateful to everyone who shared their thoughts with me, especially our students, because when they tell us what they need, we must listen. And that concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Battle. We will now move to the board member reports section of our meeting. For our new members joining us this evening, this section of the regular monthly meetings is reserved for board members to report on activities they may have engaged in the district, such as visiting a school or attending an event or something of that nature. We reserve this same spot every other meeting for committee reports. So if you're on a committee, you will be asked to, the chair of the committee will be asked to give a report. So board member reports. Are there any board members that would have information they'd like to report on this evening?
I have a report.
Director Hume.
Yes, so Foundation 191 had its monthly meeting on Tuesday, January the 12th. Just a few updates from that meeting. Final scholarship disbursements from last year are still happening. And then the 2021 scholarship application will be launching on February the 1st. They are planning an announcement that should go out to all students the week before the applications are launched. And on an even more positive news front, they even have some new scholarship opportunities that are opening up this year. So they're excited about that. Also, the foundation is exploring some COVID-friendly options for an outdoor event or other type of fundraiser later this spring, but obviously nothing has been decided yet. And then the last part of the update is that the foundation's annual organizational meeting will be at their next meeting on February the 9th. And this concludes my report.
Are there any other board members that wish to make a report this evening? Very well. Hearing none, this will conclude the informational section of our meeting this evening, and we will now move to the business meeting portion of our meeting. beginning with our consent agenda. Although board action is required, it is generally unnecessary to hold discussion on these items. In the event a board member wishes to discuss an item, that item will be moved for separate consideration. I'll ask at this point if there is any board members that wish to move an item for separate consideration. Hearing none, I will take a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'm sorry, who was that? And second, please.
Second.
Okay, motion moved by Director Alt and seconded by Director Werb. I will open, nope, we've talked, no discussion. So, Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Connor,
Can't quite hear you, Ms. Kenny.
Aye. Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester.
Aye.
Excellent, the motion passes unanimously. Now, we will move to new business. The first item being approve the secondary course catalog. Dave Helke, principal of our high school, will be making the presentation. Mr. Helke, welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair Miller. Good evening, Superintendent Battle and members of the Board of Education. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to come before you to present the changes to the high school catalog for next school year. This is a great example of, despite the pandemic, our work, the work of so many of our staff is continuing and is focused on making sure that we provide opportunities that our students can engage in some high quality learning in 191. So I'm excited to share with you some of the additions and the changes to the handbook. For those of you that have heard this for many years, this is actually kind of a small list this year. But I will go through it and highlight some of the major pieces for all of you. And then the recommendation is that the Board of Education approve the additions, deletions, and changes to the 2021-22 high school course catalog as noted below. So first additions, there are two new courses that we are adding in our pathways. One is Advanced Manufacturing Design and Fabrication, and that is in addition to the Design, Engineering, and Manufacturing pathway. That actually course is evolving from a grant that the district received from the Department of Trade and Industry. It was a grant that allows schools to create work-based type opportunities. And so this course is a combination of on-site learning and then opportunities for students to go out and, or if we're in a pandemic situation like this, at least virtually have some experiences and connect with our business partners. And so we are excited that that course is going to be offered for the first time, and it will be an additional way that students can use the technology that's available in our fabrication lab here at the high school. Another new course is Inver Hills Community College, Introduction to Criminal Justice. This is actually an Inver Hills Community College course. The colleges have a lot of online courses that are available now. And so this is an actual online course. We had one of these a couple of years ago in political science. And so students can enroll. It's a concurrent enrollment course that they can get credit, college credit, and they can get high school credit. And then they actually are with one of our teachers. And so there's a teacher that can actually assist and provide supplemental instruction as they're working through the online course through the college. And this is a great addition to our Health and Human Services pathway. And this is one area that counselors have said students have brought up in the past. So we're expecting that we will have some interest in this new course offering for the coming year. And then there were changes made to 9th grade science, and those changes are a result of changes in the state standards. The old standards
were much more concentrated on physical science in ninth grade, and the new standards that have come out really shift that focus to earth science. So all of our physical science courses have been replaced now with earth science courses. That change actually took effect for this year. It just was a decision that came after I came with the course catalog last January. In terms of deletions, I just mentioned we're getting rid of physical science, replacing it with earth science. And then the only other thing that's being deleted from the catalog is dual ranking. Dual ranking was something that came back in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s. And it was a system that was put in place similar to weighted grading to provide kind of another measure of student success based on class rank or based on GPA. And we've really honestly, over the past several years, it really has not been a system that's been in place. We haven't had any inquiries for it. It's a system that manually has to be done with our new student information system. And the conversation and discussion simply came to the point of colleges, and especially now through the pandemic, are really moving to much more holistic systems of admissions. The emphasis that is put on GPA and class rank is not nearly as intense as it was in the past. Many colleges now are really taking a much closer look at your actual coursework, the rigor of that coursework, and really taking a look at experiences that students have outside of their classes. Dr. Battle had mentioned volunteering and just participation in different organizations. And so it feels like it's the right time to say it's not really a relevant measure anymore. It's not being asked for or used by our families. And if you do talk to college admissions counselors, they would say that dual ranking and weighted grades, many times they undo that anyway when they're looking at student applications because they want to level the playing field. And so that is the one other deletion out of the catalog in addition to physical science. And then under the change section, I will just highlight the excitement of being able to bring CIS back into some of our advanced placement courses. And so we will again be offering CIS and AP in American History, Government, Economics, and Calculus. And then also just some changes in some of our sections in the general information to align actual practice with what's in the course catalog. And so those are what's being changed. I always also like to mention things that are on the docket or that are being talked about or in planning stages. One of the courses that has come up as a possible future addition to one of our pathways is cybersecurity. There's really, in the world of information technology, that is one of the fastest growing sectors. And so don't be surprised if in one of these coming years that cybersecurity is a new course that is being recommended. And then we also have a team of math teachers working on creating we're calling it Algebra 1.5. I don't know if that's actually going to be the name of the course when it's developed, but recognizing the need that we have students that come out of 8th grade that are taking Algebra 1 that haven't quite reached that level of mastery with Algebra 1 concepts. Then they come into the high school in 9th grade, take geometry, and then are expected to go into Algebra 2 when they're in 10th grade. And so they come out of 8th grade not quite mastering all those algebraic concepts. Then they move away from algebra for that year in geometry, and then they come and take Algebra 2. And so this is an attempt to provide some type of a course experience for those students so that as they're taking geometry, they're also having a chance to really go back and relearn and master some of those algebra concepts that are going to be critical for their success when they take their math in 10th and 11th grade. And so there's, like I said, there's a team of math teachers that currently is actually looking and working on that. And depending upon their progress, that might be something that some students are identified for and that we would provide as an option starting as early as next fall. So with that, again, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approve the additions, deletions, and changes to the 21-22 high school course catalog as noted below. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Halke. May I have a motion on the recommendation in front of us?
So moved.
And may I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been moved by Director Hume and seconded by Director Chester. I will open it up for discussion from the board. Director Alt has indicated that by using the raise hand in Zoom that she'd like to speak. Go ahead, please, Director Alt.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Principal Halke. Thank you for bringing this forward. And I know that there were relatively few changes, but this is always an undertaking, I'm sure, for you and your team. So thank you for that. Would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on the recommended changes on prerequisites, that language?
For prerequisites for the math classes, or?
The language that replaced successful completion with.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. So that was one of those changes to kind of reflect practice that if a student does not successfully complete geometry in 9th grade, that doesn't mean that they cannot continue on to take Algebra 2 in 10th grade. Many times students will take credit recovery or take a course in the summer. And so we just felt that saying prior completion of wasn't really what the practice was, or the prior completion or successful completion wasn't really what the practice was. The practice was prior enrollment in. So just the math has a sequence, and so we follow that sequence. But if a student doesn't successfully complete a semester, that does not mean that they can't enroll in the next course. So that's why that change was made. And I do want to acknowledge, and I forgot as I got excited presenting the changes, that yes, there are a lot of people involved in this work. I mean, I'm lucky to be able to present it, but a huge thanks goes out to Aaron's team, who actually puts the catalog together. Barb Sensi, one of my clerical workers, who spent many hours proofing a lot of detail in the catalog, and then our department chairs and others who constantly are looking and reviewing their courses and making this a complete project.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments from directors? And I will, again, just reiterate to new members, if you're not comfortable figuring out the raise hand function in Zoom, just feel free to give me some indication you'd like to speak. I'm happy to let you speak. Okay, not seeing any more discussion. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Hume,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor.
Aye.
Excellent. The resolution, or the recommendation in front of us passes unanimously. Next, we will move to the next portion of our new business section, approve adopting a resolution relating to special school board election and calling the school district special election, with Lisa Ryder, Executive Director of Business Services, presenting. Lisa, you may take the microphone.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Can you hear me? Thank
Yes,
you.
we may. You do.
Okay, so this resolution is to call the special election that must be adopted at least 74 days before the election. The period for filing affidavits of candidacy for the office of school board member of Independent School District 191 shall begin at 8 a.m. on July 27th, 2021, and shall close at 5 p.m. on August 10th, 2021. It is necessary for the school district to hold its special election for the purpose of electing one school board member to fill the remainder of a 4-year term terminating on the first Monday of January 2023. With that, the recommendation is that the Board of Education approves adopting a resolution relating to the special school board election and calling the school district special election.
Thank you. May I have a motion for the resolution in front of us?
I move.
And a second?
A second.
Thank you. Motion has been moved by Director Chester and seconded by Director Connor. I will open it up for discussion and questions. I'm not seeing any discussion or questions, so we will proceed to the vote. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Miller,
Aye.
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Hume.
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously. Next, we will move on to approve on a first reading basis changes to policy 613, graduation requirements, and policy 616, school district system accountability. Presenting will be Amina Afadal, Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. Welcome, Amina.
Thank you, Director Miller, Superintendent Battle, and members of the board. I'm presenting to you these two policies, 613 with the graduation requirement updates that were discussed in the first reading to update according to legislative and regulatory changes, as well as identifying some language that needed to be cleared. So no significant changes, but there have been some minor language changes. That has not changed since the first reading. And policy 616, which is the systems accountability, there were no significant changes from the first reading, simply some corrections that were made as called out by the board. So it is my recommendation that you accept these and approve these policies.
Excellent. I will take a motion for the recommendation to approve on a first reading basis changes to policy 613 graduation requirements and 616 school district system accountability. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Show that the motion was moved by Director Hume and seconded by Director Werb. Any discussion or comments? Nope. Very well. Seeing none. Ms. Kenny, will you please call the roll?
Said,
Aye.
Werb,
Aye.
Alt,
Aye.
Chester,
Aye.
Connor,
Aye.
Hume,
Aye.
Miller.
Aye. And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, so that concludes the section of our regular scheduled board meeting for this evening. With the rules applied for COVID, I will adjourn us without a motion and end the regular scheduled meeting. We will be adjourning to a workshop where we will be discussing some additional items in workshop format. Before proceeding to that part of the meeting, I will give us about a 10-minute break so everybody can get up and stretch their legs a bit. Let's say that we return here in, well, let's just call it at 8:30 on the nose, a little bit more than 10 minutes. Very well. You may leave your camera on or whatever you wish to do.